It was a cold, wintry night, and the year was 1998. I had just split from my girlfriend and was feeling pretty awful about it. My days were filled up with depression and isolation. I spent a lot of time in my head just basking in self-pity. One of my favorite pastimes was to walk into the woods at night, close to my house. There was a huge expanse of dense forest, home to many creatures. I did not feel any fear at all, but rather put on my rain jacket, a torch, and set off on my way. This was before phones or GPS, so I just had to trust my own intuition would bring me on the right path. It always seemed to work, for the most part. On this night, however, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It was an eerie feeling, one that I had never experienced before. I just kept walking along my walk and shook it off. Depression could do these things to your mind, I knew. And about a half an hour into my walk, I saw something blue ahead. Now, I couldn't make out what it was, so I kept walking towards it. Strangely enough, I didn't feel that much fear, but rather a sense of curiosity. What other creature would be roaming in the forest at this time, especially one that was blue? Now, as I got closer, I realized the creature or person was about the same size as myself. It was sitting down on a small embankment beside the river. It seemed to have had a long blue trench coat on, and I just assumed it was somebody who liked to walk late at night and kept walking. But some primal part of my brain was causing me to feel anxiety. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd encountered danger. As I passed in front of whatever or whoever it was, I heard a gasping sound, and my head immediately turned to the sighting. It was the most petrifying, horrifying thing I'd ever seen. Its face was ghostly white, empty sockets for eyes that emitted this orange light. It had no nose, but rather just nothing. A small mouth. Its skin was white and pulled tight against it, as if it had been dug up from a grave. I tried to scream and then immediately began to run back, not looking. Every so often, my mind would seem to hear the gasping sound, and I began to run faster and faster, anticipating that this thing was following. When I got home, I dropped to my knees and thanking the Lord for sparing me. I had no idea what it was that I encountered in the deep woods, but to my untrained eye, it appeared something supernatural and demonic. I still have nightmares about this incident to this day and just wish it never happened. But needless to say, I live very far away from that area, and I have no reason to visit there. But the memory is still etched into my brain. The eyes of the creature, its mouth and its skin, everything about it. I know I should probably try counseling for this incident, but it's just too traumatic to talk about. That's why I'm writing this down. Maybe this email will help me clear up my mind. I suppose I should give you some context. This happened in the mid-80s in New Orleans, Louisiana. It was a hot summer's day, and we were all getting ready for my eldest daughter's wedding. We had been looking forward to the event for months. We all couldn't wait. In the weeks prior to the wedding, my youngest daughter had been acting strange. She kept staring out of her bedroom window, gazing out into the woods beyond, and even seemed distracted. When we tried to get her pumped up for the wedding, she didn't show any real interest. How odd. I was worried. My youngest, whom we'll call Tammy, has always been very vivacious and excitable. I had no idea what was going on with her. The night before the wedding, we all went to bed pretty early, including myself and my husband. Now, it's important to note, I woke up at around 2:30 a.m. as I heard a strange sound. Remember, I'm a brave girl, and I felt no need to wake my husband, who could usually never be roused from sleep anyway, especially during the night and Once he's out, he's out. So I put on my housecoat and my slippers, walked down the stairs to investigate. My mind was still confused from having woken up from a deep sleep, so I didn't notice immediately that Tammy was staring out from the patio door into the woods. Tammy was around 8 at the time and was dressed in a long white nightgown. I called to her, but she didn't answer. As I moved in closer, I was getting exasperated and scared. I had no idea what was wrong with my daughter, or why she was looking out so much into those woods. But as I took her head and led her back to bed, I gazed out too and saw something terrible and frightening. It appeared to be a man, but not a man. Rather, some sort of creature in the form of one. Chalky, burnt skin, wrapped in what appeared to be this cloth. As I looked closely, it had no eyes, but rather 2 large hollow holes. Its nose, too, was caved in and looked more like a beaten-in skull. This thing was terrifying, and terror filled my entire soul, and I wondered, what in the world was I looking at? Would we have to call off the wedding? This was clearly what my daughter had been so transfixed with for the last few weeks. Immediately, I raced up the stairs and put my daughter to bed, and got into bed myself, hoping that the creature would spare myself and my family. I had no idea what to do. Would people think I was crazy if I told them? Would the authorities put me in a mental institution? This was also the mid-80s, and mental health just meant somebody was crazy and dangerous. So I just went, fast asleep. When I awoke, I wrote an account of everything I had seen. But I have kept that documentation hidden for many years now. I am only now ready to share it if you want to reach out to find more. Tammy was never the same after that incident, and has spent much of her life in and out of mental institutions. I work with the University of Paris. It's my job to explore the deep woods, identifying strange and fascinating animals, gathering as much evidence as I can of new and endangered species. It's a wonderful job, really, but occasionally you do encounter some really bizarre things. As a matter of fact, one of these times was around 2004, back when I was just a rookie trainee. I was buzzing with the newness of the job, fresh out of college, and had such an enthusiastic energy to work. I went on a hike up a nearby mountain with 2 of my colleagues. The mountain overlooked a vast expanse of forest, and you could just see rows and rows of trees as far as the eye could go. It was a wondrous and beautiful sight. As we reached the peak of the mountain, we decided it was best to camp out. It was still a calm and wonderful night. However, it didn't remain still and calm for long. That night, at around 2 in the morning, I was awakened with my colleagues by a loud yelling. We unzipped our tents and immediately charged off to investigate to see what it was. We seemed to grope around in the darkness and saw nothing or any evidence of what this could have pointed to. Eventually, we all just walked to the embers of our campfire and huddled around. It was dying out, but we decided to wait for a few minutes to see if whatever made this noise would maybe make an appearance. I, for one, was super excited, as I thought I was going to get to see something maybe cool or edgy. I went to grab my camera, but at that moment, we heard a gasping sound. We turned around and saw something I've never seen before. It looked gross, like this pale-looking thing on all fours, crawling around. It didn't have much of a face, but knowing what I do now, my only guess is that this was a crawler, I think they call it. It ran off and scurried. I tried to trace this thing, but it was already gone. The only thing I saw was its bright white skin. My eyes were able to lock onto it, but not for long. The initial excitement and youthful curiosity I felt had soon dissipated, and I felt a sense of dread, and also a sense of rightful arrogance at thinking I knew or had the capacity to understand the extent of the full natural world. Here before me was something that looked so different than anything I had ever been accustomed to, and my heartbeat grew louder by the second. My two colleagues were hyperventilating beside me. Would we be killed by the beast, or would our own lungs be overcome with weight of the horror before us, and eventually drown our young bodies of oxygen? I could tell this thing was still watching us from the woodline. It wasn't too far in the shadows. Its disgusting-looking face, I'll never forget it. I had always been filled with a sense of wonder within nature, a sense of how each species is wonderful and ultimately deserves a place. But I knew if I had a gun, this thing would have been dead, no hesitation. This and the natural realm was no part to play together. The creature, after an hour, seemed to wander off and be gone. At least, that's when I stopped feeling watched. We would still hear weird sounds from time to time, but I almost wonder. Maybe it was hunting prey and we got to see it. Whatever it was. Why had we not been killed? Did it not want to come after us? To the untrained eye, this thing looked violent. Something that had been awakened in our senses. Maybe we disturbed its territory. I don't know. Anyway, after the sighting, myself and my colleagues stayed up and just huddled together around the dying embers of the fire. We cradled close by when the sun began to rise. That's when we got up, began packing our stuff. As I had my backpack on, we were exiting. I looked back one final time at the small plot we had camped on, gazing out into the greenery, lit now by the morning sun. I could have sworn I saw this thing again, peering out at us, watching us leave its territory. But I knew we had crossed something, some boundary or regulation, that we had somehow maybe awoken within the forest. It might sound cheesy to say an ancient forest, but again, I have never seen anything like this, nor did I know it existed. In fact, the only reason I called it a crawler is because one of my friends brought this to me once I explained what I saw. He's really into, I think you call it cryptozoology, so he knows all about this stuff, and explained to me that there's a cryptid called a crawler, and said it almost matches identical to what I saw. So I can't claim that is what I saw, but I guess it would make sense if cryptids exist. Although, to be honest, I've never really given cryptids much of a thought. Hell, I barely even know anything about Bigfoot. But that's my experience. Take it or leave it.